design on the rendering, and you can see in the screen here, up here, some of the renderings, I thought that was it. Even though I could not have imagined what this car could be, when the paperwork came out and the renderings came out, I thought, yeah, you've captured what I want. And here it is, the 812 GTS. And I'm absolutely stunned at the way this has come out. I mean, not just the outside, but the interior as well. So let's talk about what's special about this car. I've never owned a Ferrari where I can either remember or been that involved in the design of it. I've never really been involved in the design of many cars like that. But first of all, the big thing is the paint. Verde Bottiglia, meaning bottle green, for those who don't understand Italian, was a very, very special color. It's a two-layer paint, and it's a historical color, and it goes back to a vintage color, maybe not a historical color. There's historical colors and there's vintage colors. I think this one's a vintage color. And those of you know who see my other cars, you'll see I normally put stripes, etc. But I wanted to create some drama in the color. And yeah, people have seen various shades of green and greens coming back, but this particular shade of green, I only know one other car in the world that's not that Super America 400. It's another GTS, and it's in Germany. And if you go to 812 GTS on Instagram, you'll see it, and that car's got a red interior. But I wanted to get back to the 60s and 70s, and this is a shade of green which is definitely out of the 60s and 70s. The next thing I wanted was, you know, I definitely like the gold wheels. I felt gold was a bit 60s and 70s as well, the gold wheels. And these gold wheels are a matte finish, and you know, beautiful, beautiful color, shade of gold, and you know, it really sets off the green. I think green and gold go well. Now, one of the things I really wanted to make sure is I wanted this car to be true to the 60s and 70s. Well, what do I mean? Well, I didn't want to be putting things on this car that just wasn't available in the 60s and 70s. You know, so what I tried to do with the Tailor Made team is build a car with materials and the way it was in the 60s and 70s, mainly the 70s. And the first thing you'll notice is I have no Ferrari shields, and that was deliberate. And the reason that was deliberate is because I really wanted to bring some authenticity into the design of this car. And the Ferrari shields were only available on cars which are homologated for racing, meaning Enzo Ferrari had a rule that if they had to build a road-going car so they could actually qualify for racing, meaning homologation, only those cars should have the Ferrari shields on the fenders or the wings. And it wasn't until Enzo Ferrari passed away did they start offering customers the option to put the shields on the fenders. So when I look at this car, it's got no racing heritage, meaning it was never made to race. It's a GT Tourer. So if Enzo Ferrari was alive today, it would not have the Ferrari shields on the fenders. And if you go and look at all the Daytonas, and particularly the 365 Daytona of the 1970s, they don't have the shields on because they were not a car that needed homologation for racing. So that's number one. To bring authenticity, no shield. And I actually think it makes the car look really, really good. Every Ferrari's got a shield on it, but I think it really, the shield is so bright and yellow, it takes away slightly from the beauty of the car, and I think that brings the beauty of the lines of the car back in. So that's number one. Number two, I wanted to stay in the theme of the 60s and 70s, and I actually decided to do my brake calipers in gloss black. I wanted them in black, and these are carbon disc, carbon brakes, but I wanted the disc calipers in black because there weren't that many crazy options. You know, I don't think there were yellow calipers and red calipers in the 70s. You know, Ferrari were just very functional sports calipers, and I decided to go with a black caliper. So on the outside, the key thing is one single colour, there's no stripe, the gold wheel, it's a matte gold wheel, and the black caliper. And that's it for the outside. I decided not to have carbon. Normally, these bits here and these bits here are carbon. But in the 70s, carbon didn't exist as a material to build a car with. It was aluminum or aluminium or steel. So if I was going to stay true to the 60s and 70s, I was not to put a carbon on this car. So there she is on the outside. Really, really simple, just as you'd get in the 60s and 70s. Gold wheels, black caliper, no shields, green. But the drama's on the inside. The drama's right on the inside. Let's have a look inside here. So what did we do? So as you can see, you know, leather was a big thing, but cloth seats were also a big thing in the 60s and 70s. And what we decided to do is, instead of put leather in, we put Alcantara to give the impression that, you know, no leather. And also, I mean, Alcantara is a more recent material, but you know, in the racing cars of the 60s and 70s, it needed to be simple. So we actually put in a proper race seat. And as per the 60s and 70s, we've got no electrics. And funny enough, this seat costs more to put in than the electric comfort seats. Everything is mechanical. And because the seat's mechanical, the steering column adjustment's mechanical. The only bit of carbon in this car, I don't know if I can even do this, see if I can pull this forward, is actually the race seat itself. The back of the seat is carbon, but it's mainly hidden. And just to get the race seat, we had to get the carbon back. So the first thing on the spec, we did Posh Verde Alcantara, which means posh green Alcantara, and we had the orange Cavallino stitched into the headrest. And there's no fanciness on this seat. It is a proper racing seat, but it's really, really comfortable. And all the mechanics, all the seat adjustments are mechanical. Seat adjustment, height adjustment, it's a seat lifter, backwards and forwards. I even got the aluminum race pedals, aluminum side piece. Now, the Alcantara continues along here underneath and goes all the way along there. Goes along the middle here. Now, in the spirit of being the 70s and using cloth, I don't have carpets. Take a look at this. This is canvas. And I really, really like the idea of not going with carpets and going with canvas, which was in spirit of being a racing car. Now, I didn't want to have a bare metal floor, but I thought canvas was the next best thing. So we got canvas, not carpets. And this is quite an unusual material in the car. Now, continuing on a little bit more in terms of the materials, what's really interesting is these finishes here, around here, around here, around the handle. If you notice, it's got a pitted finish. This is a hammered metal finish. I'll even come inside here and you can see the hammered metal finish here, even on here, the hammered metal finish everywhere, including the paddles, hammered metal finish. Now what's interesting is these on a normal 812 are plastic or carbon. They're made out of metal, they're cast out of metal, and they've got this metal finish on it. This brings back the essence of hand-built motor cars of the 1960s and 70s in terms of a hammered finish. That's an amazing, amazing finish. I don't think many cars have this on it, and I think this one really suits it well. What's interesting, these orange strips, contrast, are actually Connolly, ochre Connolly, and these orange strips here, these accents here in orange, and along the sides of the seats here, the piping and these inserts along here are all Connolly hide, including the steering wheel here, Connolly hide. You've even got the hammered metal finish around the clock here, which is really, really cool, and the Connolly hide going through here. So there's some really amazing level of detail. You look at the steering wheel and it's got all the hammered metal finish all around here. Now what I did do, which is really interesting, I opted for a black clock dial. All the cars in the 60s and 70s were all black dials, and keeping to that actual authenticity, doing my best to keep that authenticity, I chose a black dial in the cockpit here. The drama's in the car itself, inside the interior, and you know, the amount, and if I take a step back, you know, it really looks cool. Now here's the interesting thing. This nameplate here, as you can see, Ferrari Tailor Made, this is actually a carbon plate. On Tailor Made cars they put a carbon plate here. However, this one is carbon, and because carbon wasn't available in the 60s and 70s, I've had it painted and had the Tailor Made and the Ferrari badge painted on. Normal Tailor Made cars or normal Ferraris have the badge stuck on. This is a hand painted badge, and this line here is the same colour as the car. Minor detail, but it's important to point out because all these is part of the design. So this panel is a carbon panel painted and put together. Now the other thing I did on the steering wheel, as you can see, we've got these Connolly ochre inserts here, but more importantly, I did not put the LED lighting. Could have put the LED steering wheel. On my Roma I do have the LED carbon steering wheel, but that's a more modern car. Keeping in line with the 60s and 70s, I really didn't see cars with LED lights on top of the steering wheel. Obviously didn't see carbon, and because of that I decided I didn't want the LED lights. So there we have it. 812 GTS, inspired by the 1960s and 70s cars of that era, inspired a little bit by my childhood in the 70s, inspired by the British sports cars, the Aston Martins, the Ford Capris, the Ford Cortinas, the TR7s, and this is the result. Tell me, how great does it look? This is Mickey. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the actual tour of the spec of my 812 GTS, and I'll speak to you soon.
And sometimes you just gotta believe there's something that'll give you relief. There's something